They fired me on a Wednesday morning, 2 days before the billion-dollar merger was set to close. The executives thought I was just a replaceable compliance manager, but buried in the contract was a clause no one remembered. Without my signature, the deal was worthless. I didn't warn them. I didn't argue. I just walked away and let the clock run out. By Friday at 5 p.m., they'd learn how one overlooked detail can bring down an empire. If you want more stories where arrogance backfires and power flips overnight, subscribe and share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your take. They fired me on a Wednesday morning, just like that, as if 10 years of my work could be erased with a single smug sentence. Ethan Cole, the newly promoted VP, leaned against the edge of my desk with a grin too wide for someone who thought he had just solved a problem. "We're restructuring, Sarah," he said, like he was delivering good news. "Streamlining before the merger." I knew better. It wasn't about efficiency, it was about ambition. His. What he didn't know was that the very merger he wanted credit for depended on me in ways he hadn't even bothered to check. I walked into HR's office like I was stepping into a play I had already seen. Rachel Gomez, the HR director, slid a packet across the table, talking about severance as though I should be grateful for the offer. She avoided eye contact when she handed me the release form, like she knew they were cutting too deep and too fast. My badge was deactivated before I even left the building, as if speed could erase the fact that I had been the one holding their compliance together year after year. I didn't fight it. I didn't plead. I smiled, cleaned out my desk, and walked past Ethan without a word. He smirked, convinced I'd been outmaneuvered. But the truth was simple. He had just walked his company into the one trap I'd built years ago. By the time the merger papers landed on the table Friday afternoon, there would be a single empty line where my name was supposed to be. And without it, every promise they'd made to investors and every bonus they'd already counted would evaporate. I didn't need revenge. I only needed silence and time. When I first drafted the compliance framework for mergers, I knew executives would skim the fine print. They always did. Years ago, during a late-night negotiation with outside counsel, I insisted on inserting a clause that protected continuity of sensitive accounts. It was written in plain English but buried deep in the documents. For the merger to be valid, my signature as compliance officer was mandatory. No alternates, no substitutes, no shortcuts. At the time, they agreed without blinking, too eager to close another deal to notice how much weight those words carried. To them it was a formality. To me, it was insurance. For a decade, that clause sat untouched, highlighted in my personal copy of the contract, a quiet safeguard in case someone decided my work didn't matter. Now that day had come. Ethan Cole, with his polished suit and shallow smile, believed compliance was just paperwork, that anyone could pick it up and push it through. He didn't understand that mergers weren't only about money, they were about trust, regulation, and signatures that carried legal gravity. Mine carried the heaviest. Without it, the Department of Justice wouldn't approve the filing, the rival company wouldn't release funds, and shareholders would have nothing but smoke in their hands. I remembered every eye roll when I asked for more time, every impatient sigh when I flagged risks. They thought I was slowing them down. In reality, I was the brake that kept the entire machine from flying off a cliff. And now, without me, there was no brake at all. While they were busy drafting press releases about record profits, I knew the truth. Their empire balanced on a single line that only I could fill, and I had no intention of giving it to them. I left the building without ceremony, my box of belongings balanced in my arms, the city of Chicago spread out below the glass lobby doors. To anyone watching, it looked like a clean exit, but silence was my weapon, and waiting was my strategy. I didn't need to storm back in or shout about mistakes. I only needed the clause to do what it was designed to do. By Thursday afternoon, the first cracks appeared. A friend from legal, Someone who had survived 3 reorganizations texted me. Rivals lawyers asking about your signature. Did you sign already? I didn't reply. That was the beauty of it. Silence was an answer in itself. Inside the high-rise, Ethan and the others were probably dismissing it as a minor hiccup. They always underestimated problems until they were on fire. By Friday morning, the tone had shifted. My inbox filled with urgent emails, all stamped with red exclamation points. Just a formality, Sarah. We need you to come in. We can work something out. Your severance can be adjusted. The arrogance had started to sour into panic. I read each message carefully, savoring the desperation between the lines, but I never typed a single response. I knew how mergers worked. The rival's CEO wouldn't wait around. They had leverage now, and they would use it. Without my signature, the deal was already tilting toward collapse. All I had to do was keep breathing, let the clock run, and watch the walls close in on the people who thought I was replaceable. By Friday afternoon, the silence had turned deafening, the kind that fills boardrooms when no one has the right answer. At 3 o'clock, my phone lit up with a call from Rachel Gomez, the HR director who had handed me the severance packet like it was a farewell gift. Her voice was sugar-coated, forced calm, masking urgency. Sarah, we just need you to stop by and sign a few papers. Nothing complicated. I didn't answer. At 3:30, it was Mark Turner, the CFO, leaving a voicemail that tried to sound reasonable but cracked at the edges. This is bigger than all of us. You don't want to be responsible for blowing up a billion-dollar merger. I let his words hang in the air like smoke. By 4 o'clock, the calls turned sharper. Ethan Cole finally decided to speak directly. He didn't waste time with niceties. Sarah, don't play games. This merger goes through tonight, with or without you. His arrogance had curdled into anger, but he still hadn't read the clause. There was no without me. There never had been. I muted the call before he could finish and set my phone face down. At 4:15, the rival's attorneys issued an ultimatum. Signature by 5 o'clock, or the deal was dead. That news rippled through my old office like an earthquake. I could almost see David Collins, the CEO, gripping the edge of the boardroom table, realizing the empire he promised investors was balancing on the name of the employee they had just discarded. At 4:30, another email came, this time marked urgent, from David himself. We need you to return immediately. Compensation will be discussed. This delay is unacceptable. The words weren't a request. They were a command from a man used to control. But the deadline wasn't listening to him, and neither was I. Every minute ticked louder. The skyscraper boardroom, the shareholders, the press releases already drafted. It was all about to dissolve. By 4:45, I knew they were cornered. A pack of executives staring at the one blank line they couldn't fill. They had minutes left, and no amount of money, begging, or threats could buy back the time they wasted. I didn't need to raise my voice. The clock was doing the work for me. At 4:55, the last round of messages hit my phone in a frantic wave. Voicemails stacked one on top of the other, emails flooding in faster than I could scroll. By then, it didn't matter. The contract required one thing, my signature, and I wasn't giving it. At 4:59, I imagined the rival's lawyers standing by their own screens watching the seconds bleed away. At exactly 5 p.m., the merger portal closed with finality, as if a steel door had slammed shut. The deal was dead. No extensions. No loopholes. One missing name turned a billion-dollar dream into a legal void. Inside that Chicago skyscraper, I pictured Ethan's smirk collapsing, David's fists tightening around the edge of the table, Rachel staring at the floor, Mark realizing the numbers no longer added up. At 5:01, the rival officially pulled out, citing material breach. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was the sound of an empire imploding in real time. I didn't sabotage them. I didn't break a law. I just stayed still while their empire crumbled under the weight of one empty line. The collapse was instant, but the aftershocks were worse. At 5:15, news spread that the rival had officially withdrawn, and by 5:30 the stock ticker lit up red like a warning flare. Shares plummeted faster than anyone could catch them, wiping out months of inflated promises in less than an hour. By 6 o'clock, 3 of the company's biggest clients had already announced they were terminating contracts, citing instability and leadership concerns. They weren't wrong. Without the merger, the company was exposed, vulnerable, and bleeding out in public view. Reporters circled like vultures, pushing headlines into the evening broadcasts. The billion-dollar blunder. Merger fails at the finish line. Leadership in crisis. I could imagine the boardroom, the blinds pulled tight against the setting sun, David Collins staring at the floor, while Mark Turner explained that their credit line would evaporate by Monday. Ethan Cole, the man who fired me, must have been sweating through his suit jacket, replaying every moment of that Wednesday morning when he told me I was no longer needed. He thought cutting me out made him powerful. Instead, he had handed me the detonator. Shareholders called emergency meetings, lawyers drafted lawsuits, and inside the skyscraper, the walls began to close in. Careers that had been built over decades crumbled in an evening. Their reputations weren't bruised. They were destroyed. And I hadn't moved a finger. That's what made it worse for them. Knowing the destruction came not from sabotage, not from theft, but from their own arrogance. They thought I was replaceable. Now they were learning in the most public way possible that I had been the one thread holding the fabric together. Once pulled, the whole empire unraveled. By Monday morning, the skyscraper still stood, but inside it was hollowed out, a shell of the empire they had promised the world. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, scrolling through headlines that replayed their downfall in brutal detail. Every article circled back to the same fact: the merger had collapsed because of one missing signature. My missing signature. I hadn't stormed into the boardroom, hadn't begged for recognition, hadn't even raised my voice. I simply stepped aside and let the clause I had written years ago do exactly what it was meant to do. Ethan's smirk was gone. David's confidence was gone. Rachel's polished speeches meant nothing. All of them had been stripped bare by a detail they never cared enough to notice. People think revenge is loud, but the truth is, the most devastating revenge is quiet. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence, with the sound of a clock ticking down until the last second runs out. They fired me because they thought I was replaceable, and now their empire was gone because I refused to be. I didn't break the law. I didn't cross the line. I just let them choke on their own arrogance. They fired me believing I was nothing but paperwork, a name on a line, a formality they could erase without consequence. But arrogance is blind, and in their haste to climb, they never saw that the one person they dismissed was holding the single thread keeping their empire intact. When I refused to sign, their billion-dollar future dissolved in silence. That wasn't rage. It wasn't sabotage. It was proof that the smallest detail ignored by the powerful can collapse everything they built. Looking back, the lesson is painfully clear. Never underestimate the quiet worker who carries knowledge, relationships, or details others dismiss. In life, people will often mistake humility for weakness or silence for surrender. But silence can be strategy, and patience can be the sharpest weapon. My story shows that real strength isn't about shouting louder, but about knowing where the pressure points are, and choosing the moment to let others face the consequences of their own neglect. In today's workplace, many of us feel overlooked, undervalued, or easily replaced. But the truth is, every one of us holds unique value, whether it's experience, relationships, or skills no one else has. The key is to recognize that value ourselves. even if others don't, and to build safeguards so it can't be stolen or dismissed. The moral isn't about destroying others, but about ensuring your contributions are recognized and your worth isn't casually erased. Revenge here wasn't about burning everything down. It was about letting those who disrespected me face the natural weight of their own arrogance. They learned that replacing people without understanding what they truly carry is a mistake that can't always be undone. How to get started today. 1. Write down 3 unique skills or contributions you bring to your workplace that no one else replicates. 2. Document your work and keep personal copies of your accomplishments. Don't let your value be invisible. 3. Invest time in building relationships, not just completing tasks. People remember trust more than titles. 4. If you're undervalued, start preparing a path forward, whether inside or outside the company, on your own terms. Your silence doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you're waiting. And when the right moment comes, it can be more powerful than any outburst. If you've ever been underestimated at work, share your story in the comments. Subscribe for more corporate revenge tales, and pass this video along. You never know who might need the reminder that being replaceable is often the biggest illusion of all.